and a very warm welcome to another edition of World Panorama. Like always, get ready to catch up on the biggest international news of the week. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get to your detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Doubts persist even as Syria okays to be a part of the chemical arms pact. Kerry-Lavrov meet in Geneva as peace continues to elude the Syrians. Iran's Hassan Rouhani says time for resolving nuclear dispute is limited, hints at a new round of talks at the UN meeting. And it's official, 33-year-old Kimi Raikkonen will join Fernando Alonso in Ferrari's driver lineup starting in 2014 as the replacement for Massa. Our top story this week. The United States and Russia began high-stakes talks on Thursday on Moscow's plan for Syria to surrender its chemical weapons as Damascus formally applied to join a chemical weapons ban. But Secretary of State John Kerry underscored that U.S. military force may still be necessary if diplomacy fails. Now, these talks were part of a diplomatic push that prompted President Barack Obama to put on hold plans for U.S. airstrikes in response to a chemical weapons attack on civilians near Damascus on 21st of August. Now, reports say that the U.S. may accept a UN Security Council resolution that stops short of authorizing military action for Syrian violations of a chemical weapons deal. The move would overcome objections from Russia and contribute to talks in Geneva and New York on a Syrian disarmament accord. Things are moving fast, hinting that diplomacy might very well have a chance here. But Syria's future, and for that matter, what's happening within the country, is something that no one is talking about. We'll try and decode the latest events regarding America's moves on Syria and understand the implications of actions being talked about. A lot is at stake here. This week, I welcome Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Editor with the Hindustan Times on the show. Welcome, Pramit. Now, before we get to understanding the crisis in Syria, a look at what's been happening.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's first remarks since the Russian plan was announced, a way to avert a potential US military strike in response to the August 21st chemical weapons attack. Assad's remarks came in as the Russian and US foreign ministers were holding crucial talks in Geneva, chalking out a plan to place Syria's chemical weapons under international control.
خلال الأيام القليلة المقبلة ستقوم سوريا بإرسال
Конечно, в ближайшие несколько дней Сирия отправит обращение в ООН и Организацию по запрещению химического оружия. В этом обращении будут направлены технические документы, которые необходимы для подписания соглашения. После этого начнется работа, которая приведет к подписанию Конвенции о запрещении химоружия. Эта конвенция имеет множество пунктов. Один из них – это запрет производства химического оружия.
The US wants the chemical disarmament plan to be accompanied by a threat of punitive measures, which would be contained in a UN Security Council resolution in case Assad does not follow through on his promises. However, Russia opposes such a resolution. All eyes now on the much-delayed Geneva II peace talks, the date for which is set September 28th. Meanwhile, the UN has confirmed it has received documents from Syria on joining the Chemical Weapons Convention, a key step in the Russian plan.
With this, the chapter of the so-called chemical weapons should be ended, and legally speaking, Syria has become, starting today, a full member of the convention.
With this, Russian President Vladimir Putin insisted Syria was serious about giving up its chemical weapons.
Думаю, что мы должны приветствовать такое решение сирийского руководства. И хочу выразить надежду на то, что это будет очень серьезным шагом на пути к разрешению сирийского кризиса. Это подтверждает серьезные намерения наших сирийских партнеров идти по этому.
The US blames Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for the use of chemical weapons, although Assad denies his government was involved and instead points to rebels engaged in a 2-year-old civil war against his government. President Barack Obama began building a case for support at home and abroad for a punitive military strike on Assad's forces, then changed course and asked Congress to give him explicit authority for a limited strike.
All right, Pramit, talking about the talks between Kerry and Lavrov. Now, what is it? What's the deal here?
Well, I think the game is that they want a resolution, both sides want a resolution that commits Syria to signing the Chemical Weapons Convention and surrendering over time its chemical arsenal. That's the solid part of the agreement that the two sides have. The question is then, what do you add on besides that? Now, the Americans argue correctly that's the only reason why Syria is doing this is the threat of U.S. military action. So their initial argument was that we should have a clause saying that if Syria does not fulfill this, then there will be sanction for an airstrike by whoever in the Security Council wants to do it. Now, the Russians have said that that's unacceptable. They don't want the military strike. So therefore, for the time being, that's just simply been dropped, and that the Americans have said, okay, we won't have that. We will not commit, which is what Syria wants, to saying that we will never strike, which is what the Syrians have asked for, but we will not have a commitment to striking either. That will just be understood as a unilateral American action if Syria does not fulfill. So you have a resolution that is effectively shrinking in size, but it's going to be built around this one core issue. And I think this weekend you'll see a press conference, sometime this weekend will be announced, in which they will discuss.
So which also means that all the ambiguities that were being talked about earlier, it's going to be more and more specific. But after having said that, do you think there's any reason to be skeptical on the part of Syria to not go ahead with this resolution?
Well, Syria, as far as I know, last heard, has already begun to put conditionalities. They've asked that if yes, we will accept this resolution, but America must commit to not supplying arms to the Syrian rebels, and so on and so forth, which of course the Americans have said nothing doing. So there the question really then is how much pressure can Russia apply to Syria to make them come on board. But my guess is at present we will see the resolution, the basic resolution of commitment of Syria to the Chemical Weapons Convention. And after that, we'll then see how long it takes for Syria to actually sign. And then the more cumbersome process, which is actually sending in international monitors to begin the destruction of this huge chemical weapons complex.
That's going to happen over a period of time.
That's going to take a long time. India is a signatory to the Chemical Weapons Convention, and if I remember correctly, it's taken us 10 years to dismantle our chemical weapons capacity, and we had a very small arsenal. America signed it, I think, in 2002, 2003, is still dismantling its chemical weapons.
So it's going to take a while, but does that also mean that looking ahead at the Geneva two talks also, which Kerry and Lavrov have been talking about, a military strike could be off the table altogether?
Well, not altogether. It depends. If Syria does sign the Chemical Weapons Convention, I think the understanding will be at that point that a chemical strike, an airstrike is off the table. Okay. That there is a basic commitment. Now, the interesting thing, of course, in all of this does not affect the fighting in Syria. It just merely says that a kind of weapon that was used has become unacceptable and will therefore be sanctioned. It's a punishment for Syria for using that weapon. But the actual civil war will just continue. And America has already committed to supplying.
So that means the situation might very well be what it was before 21st of August.
Exactly. We'll just go back to that, which is why it's interesting that part of this agreement, that since the Russians and the Americans are actually talking to each other about Syria, or about anything for that matter, is being that they will now also consider restarting the proposed bilateral peace negotiations on Syria between Russia and the United States. In many ways, as far as what's happening on the ground in Syria is concerned, that may actually be the most important development, because that will attempt to address the actual civil war.
Right. So right now we have had some strong statements coming in from UN chief as well, where he's actually lashed out at Assad over there. But right now we don't see a major role of the United Nations. Post, when this crisis is resolved, then do you see the role of United Nations?
Yeah, the UN is basically going to be the legitimizing force, legitimizing agency for any action that's carried out. That if you're going to monitor or dismantle Syria's chemical weapons, you have to do it under a UN flag. The Syrians obviously will not accept an American flag. The Americans will not accept a Russian flag. Nobody will trust the Syrians to do it themselves. So therefore the UN is the only agency that has both the technical capacity, because they handle the Chemical Weapons Convention. There's, I think, an organization for the Chemical Weapons Convention, which actually goes out and does all of this anyway. And second, later on, if you get into an actual Syrian peace process, then automatically that's almost certain to come under the UN auspices, because there is no other organization right now that has that ability under international law to carry that out.
Right. Talking about the situation within Syria, you know, the rebels, they're unhappy with the way things are really panning out,
Yes.
you know, the peace process. So does that also mean that we're going to be looking at more retaliation?
Well, the rebels are unhappy because they had hoped that the airstrike would change the balance of power inside in the civil war. They've been slowly losing ground to the Assad government forces. So they had hoped that the airstrike would push the advantage back in their direction. That seems not to be happening, at least not for quite a while. So they're unhappy, and they've ordered that there should at least be a very strong resolution. There will be a certain degree of humiliation, of course, if Assad does surrender his chemical weapons. There will be a figure of loss. But as I said, the civil war on the ground, nothing will be changing for the time being. The war will just continue. The Syrians will probably be more interested in the fact that America is committed to providing them weapons, and depending on the quality and the quantity of weapons that comes in, that will be a deciding factor for them.
Right.
But at present, no. The Syrian rebels have not too much to gain from what's going on.
That's really sad, because the situation is deteriorating within Syria. But I want to lastly talk to you about the Geneva II talks now. The last time we saw what happened, this time what are the expectations?
Well, we'll see. A peace process, it's not clear, for example, what exactly the nature of this peace process would be. I mean, the Syrians and the rebels and the Assad government clearly want to destroy each other. So what exactly are you going to negotiate here? So I think it'll be almost from scratch. As far as I know, nobody even has a peace plan. There's no real plan. And I think what will really happen is that the US and Russia will try to sit down and should we say, draw certain rules regarding international intervention, and then finally draw some sort of see if the one route would be to Assad to form a government that includes the rebels, but at present it's hard to see that happening given the hatred between the two sides. The other option would be a partition of Syria, which is some academics have proposed, that the northern Alawi-dominated areas be declared a separate enclave, and the southern Sunni areas become something else. That's a Lebanese kind of solution. And in fact, I think the Lebanese civil war is going to be seen as the potential template for what could be used in Syria.
So things are happening in two parts over here. There are two wars, two peace processes. At least one of them is making some headway. Right. We'll see how things pan out in the days to come. Ramit, thanks so much for joining me and sharing your thoughts with us. Time for a short break. On the other side, we talk about new developments in Iran's nuclear dispute. But as we hit a break, take a look at two new offerings from Apple. The iPhone 5S and 5C, the high-tech models aimed at Indian and Chinese markets, have been dismissed by Chinese, saying they're too expensive. I'll be back.
This is iPhone 5S.
Thanks for staying with us. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, a relatively moderate leader who was elected in June, has vowed to smooth Tehran's relations with world leaders to cut international sanctions imposed over its atomic activities. But Western envoys at the International Atomic Energy Agency said Iran was still refusing to comply with UN Security Council and IAEA resolutions demanding it suspend key parts of its nuclear program. In what seems to signal a more flexible approach from Tehran's new administration, Iran has said it's ready to cooperate with the United Nations nuclear watchdog. At the same time, making it clear at the IAEA meet that it is not going to give up its rights to a peaceful nuclear energy program.
There is a strong political will on Iranian side to constructively interact with the respective partners on nuclear issue, and we hope there would be the same approach and political will on the other sides. I also stressed that we would continue to cooperate with the agency in good faith to find agreed modalities to overcome existing issues once and for all.
Also this week, China said it's willing to make constructive efforts to accelerate multilateral talks on Iran's nuclear program. Iran's new president has said a win-win deal with world powers over its nuclear program is possible, but time for an agreement is limited. His remarks come ahead of his address at the UN General Assembly this month.
Iran has always expressed its readiness for meaningful, result-oriented and time-bound negotiations based on mutual respect and a win-win agreed solution. As it was underlined by our president, if the other side wants a proper response, they should speak to Iran not with a language of threat or sanction, but with a language of respect.
The negotiations scheduled for this month will involve the International Atomic Energy Agency and the so-called P5+1 group. Hassan Rouhani, who succeeded President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad last month, has pledged to ease international sanctions imposed by Western powers, which accuse his country of developing nuclear weapons. Iran says its program is for peaceful purposes. Much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of other international news of the week.
European Commission President José Manuel Barroso called on the EU to cement its fragile economic recovery, saying political upheaval was still the biggest risk. Giving his annual State of the Union speech to the European Parliament, Barroso said investors still lack confidence in the Eurozone. The Eurozone returned to growth in spring of this year after its longest ever recession brought on by the debt and banking crisis that nearly broke the currency bloc apart. Norway's Conservative Party swept into office on Monday, ousting the ruling Labour Party in a landslide election. The Conservatives may form a coalition government with Norway's anti-immigration Progress Party, among others. Stoltenberg and his allies collected just 72 seats and the Prime Minister announced he would step down after 8 years and 2 straight terms in office. Fighting intensified between Muslim rebels and government troops in the southern Philippines on Thursday as a standoff reached the 4th day. 3 soldiers were killed as fighting with Muslim rebels who laid siege to a bustling port city in the southern Philippines spread to a nearby province. The MNLF fighters were holed up in 6 of the 98 neighborhoods in Zamboanga city, having taken an estimated 100 hostages. North Korea's state-run television KRT broadcast video of its leader Kim Jong-un watching a concert in Pyongyang to celebrate the 65th anniversary of the country's founding with his wife Ri Sol-ju. Kim was joined by some of his top officials, including his aunt, Kim Yong-hui, his main military aide, as well as North Korean premier. Greece's jobless rate hit a record high of 27.9% in June. Data showed on Thursday as the labour market continued to buckle in a deep recession with austerity policies linked to the country's bailout. Unemployment rose from 27.6% in May and was more than twice the average rate in the Eurozone of 12.1% in July. The latest reading was the highest since Greek statistics service Elstat began publishing monthly jobless data in 2006. Coordinated car and suicide bomb attack on a Shiite mosque in Iraqi capital killed at least 33 people on September 11. A further 55 people were wounded, some critically, in the blasts which took place in the northwestern Kasra district of Baghdad. It was not immediately clear who had carried out the attack, but Sunni Islamist militants who view Shiites as non-believers have been regaining momentum and striking on a near daily basis this year.
And shifting gears, time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week. Here's all the sports action. The Formula One saga of the season is finally over. Kimi Raikkonen's highly anticipated switch to Ferrari is official for the 2014 campaign following a formal team statement on Wednesday. Felipe Massa's exit from Ferrari announced on Tuesday by the Brazilian and the signing of Raikkonen confirmed now means that Ferrari have a fire and ice combination. Raikkonen has signed a 2-year deal that will see him partner Fernando Alonso, whose contract runs until 2016. Unlike in the past where Ferrari have opted to go with the clear number 1, the 33-year-old's return will give them the strongest lineup on the grid, as they will be the only team with 2 world champions. Rafael Nadal captured his 13th Grand Slam singles crown by defeating Novak Djokovic for the US Open men's title. A day later, Nadal showed off the fruits of his effort, his latest hardware in New York's Central Park. The Spaniard earned his second major championship this season following his French Open triumph, sealing the 6-2, 3-6, 6-4, 6-1 win when Djokovic dumped a forehand into the net, sending Nadal down onto his back before rolling face down and sobbing in joy. Germany's Thomas Bach was elected president of the International Olympic Committee, succeeding Belgian Jacques Rogge and maintaining a European stranglehold on the most powerful position in world sport. Bach, 59, the first Olympic champion to head the IOC, is the 9th president only in the body's 119-year history and the 8th European IOC leader. A triumph in Tokyo. Governor Naoki Ino's returned home to the cheers of thousands gathered in a plaza on 10 September, thanking everyone for the support that brought the 2020 Olympic Games to Japan. Tokyo won the right to host the Olympic Games for the second time, overcoming fears about radiation from the stricken Fukushima nuclear plant to land the 2020 edition of the world's biggest sporting event. 4 times World Cup winners Italy clinched a place at the 2014 finals in Brazil after coming from a goal down to beat the Czech Republic 2-1 and win Group B. A Giorgio Chiellini header and Mario Balotelli's penalty early in the second half cancelled out Libor Kozak's 19th minute opener for the visitors and moved the Italians on to 20 points, 7 ahead of second place Bulgaria with 2 games to play. Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies, music and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap. Robert De Niro's latest flick, The Family, premiered in New York City this week. On the red carpet was also Michelle Pfeiffer. The actress said she was thrilled to get a chance to act opposite De Niro in The Family after appearing with him in 2 movies earlier. In the dark comedy The Family, De Niro plays Giovanni Manzoni, a former mafioso who ratted out his cronies in exchange for immunity and new identity via the Witness Protection Program.
How was the first day?
Nothing special.
It was a celebrity-studded night at the Toronto International Film Festival as Julia Roberts hit the red carpet to premiere her latest film, August, Osage County. The Oscar-winning actress posed for photographs and greeted fans walking the carpet in an equally red above-the-knee skirt. Also hitting the carpet in Toronto were co-stars Ewan McGregor and Juliette Lewis. Hundreds of Rihanna fans braved the rain to catch a glimpse of the singer as she arrived at a clothes store in London to launch her new collection. Fresh from New York Fashion Week, the Diamond singer switched cities ahead of the start of the Fashion Week to promote her latest line for River Island. Among a sea of gorgeous automobiles, it's arguably the most iconic of them all, or at the very least the most memorable. A piece of James Bond memorabilia that set back its new owner £550,000. The Lotus Esprit from the 1977 James Bond movie The Spy Who Loved Me, starring Roger Moore as the world's most famous spy, was sold by RM Auctions in South London at below guide price. The car displayed in a water feature no longer actually functions as a car, instead converted into a fully working submarine. That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. See you next week, same time with more international news. Till then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This week, I closed the show with the highlights of the New York Fashion Week. Models walked the ramp for designers Vera Wang, Tommy Hilfiger, Carolina Herrera, and many more. This is me, Sana Khan, signing off.